Hello and welcome to Pabbly Connect. So this video is going to be a complete guide on how to integrate an app inside Pabbly Connect if your application has authentication based on bearer token. Now to do so guys, you just require two basic things. First thing is the API doc of the application which you want to integrate inside Pabbly Connect, and second thing is a Pabbly Connect account. So let's begin. So here, as you can see, we have reached to Pabbly Connect's dashboard. So this is the front-end dashboard of Pabbly Connect. And then after reaching to this dashboard, to go to the app's integration page, you just have to go to your URL section. And after connect.pabbly.com, we just have to enter /app. And here we are at the apps page of our Pabbly Connect account. After reaching to this page, just click on create a new app button and give your application a name which you are integrating and click on save. Here guys, in this video, we are just going to take an example of MailerLite, which is an email marketing application. So MailerLite's API authentication is also based on bearer token. So we are going to take it as an example and see how this integration is going to be done. So here I have already made an integration with MailerLite named as MailerLite clone. So let's open this. And here guys, when you will create a new app after giving the name, the first thing it asks us is some basic details of the application. Like what is the name of the application, what is the description of the application, what does it do. Then we have to upload the app logo, and the logo should be 64 cross 64 inch pixels. Then after that, it asks us one of the most important thing, and that is the auth type. What is the authentication type this app is going to use? So in this video, we are discussing bearer token authentication. So here we have selected bearer token. If you want to detect the authentication type of the application, if you don't know, just refer to the API doc. Now guys, after selecting our authentication type as bearer token, here you can see that we have added some help text. So this help text is going to be shown to the user who is using your application in the front end. So while making the connection, here in the help text, you can actually enter the complete guide that how a user can get access to the API token or the bearer token of their account of your application. Let's take example of MailerLite. So by following these steps, a user can get access to the bearer token of their MailerLite account. After entering this help text, just click on save, and guys, we will see that we have completed the first step. We have entered some basic details of the application. Now let's move to the triggers. So after entering application details from the left side, let's click on triggers and start building a trigger. Now to build a new trigger, just click on this create trigger button, give your trigger event a name and click on save. Right now, we are going to just have a look on an existing trigger which I have already created. So the name of this trigger is campaign send. So I have created this trigger. I have entered the trigger event's name and the trigger event description. What does this trigger event do? Then after that, it is giving us an option that to add a video tutorial URL. So if you have a dedicated video on how this trigger works of your application, you can add the URL of that video as well. The next thing it asks us is the trigger type. So this is quite important. So in the drop-down below, we can see three different types of triggers which Pabbly Connect offer. First one is webhook setup by instruction. If you build a trigger like this by selecting webhook setup by instruction, in this case, Pabbly Connect provides a webhook URL to the user who is creating the automation workflow. And the user can actually copy that webhook URL and paste it to their own account of the application. So in this way, the user is actually manually adding the webhook URL. The other thing, the second option which we have is webhook setup by API request. In this case, if you select this, then the webhook URL is added to the application of yours by making an API request or API call. And the third thing is the polling to check new data. And if your application does not support webhooks, then you can select this. And in this case, the data is fetched from your application by polling method. Like after a dedicated time of interval, Pabbly Connect will go and check for new data and take it to the Pabbly Connect workflow. So you have to select the trigger type according to your application that supports. So in MailerLite, it supports webhook setup by API request. So I will select that trigger type over here. Now the next thing it asks us is trigger response type. So here in dropdown, we have option to get a simple response or to get the response, advanced format response in arrays and all. So here we just like to have the simple response. So by default, we have selected simple. Also, if you want to add some kind of trigger instructions or important help text, you can also add those over here. So if your trigger type is webhook setup by instruction, you can add the instruction or any kind of important help text which you want to give to your users, you can add them over here. After entering all of these details, just click on save. Now moving ahead, after entering trigger details, we will scroll down and come to the most important part of a trigger. That is the trigger events API configuration. Now the trigger event which you are building, you have to completely configure over here in this section. First thing you have to select is the HTTP method. So in the drop down, we have all the 5 methods. You have to select according to your use case and API endpoint. So right now what we are going to do, we are just going to build this trigger that is campaign send in MailerLite. So in this trigger, this is the HTTP method that is post and this is the endpoint URL. So using this endpoint URL, we are adding the webhook in the application. Next, we have to select the request body type. In dropdown, we have JSON, form data, encoded form data, text, HTML, and XML. You have to select your own. And do you want to wrap the response or wrap the data in array or not? So here we have selected no by default. Now the next thing which it asks us is the authentication. So from the drop down, we are going to select the authentication method, that is the bearer token. And after that, here we have to actually enter the token, the bearer token or the API token of our account from the application. Now guys, while integrating the application in Pabbly Connect, first we have to actually enter the API token and connect it and test it. So in runtime, whatever the API token or bearer token the user is going to enter while making the connection with their account, that token will be replaced over here. So your token is not going to get exposed. It will be keep on replacing in runtime. But right now, while integrating the application, it is very important to enter the token. So I'll just enter the API token of my MailerLite account. Then if you want to keep on sending some kind of headers for each and every response, you can select HTTP headers and add those headers over here. As well as by clicking on this button, you can configure those headers. Now the next field is of set body query, path and parameters. So here with this API endpoint, what kind of parameters you want to send according to your trigger events use case, you have to enter those over here. So it is obvious that you have to basically enter the parameter as it is given in the API doc. Like here in this API doc, if message is written in this way, and so the parameter for message will be exactly like this. Just create the parameter which you want to enter over here. And after that, by clicking on the settings button in front of it, you have to actually configure the field details. Like the parameter which we are going to use in this trigger is going to be a webhook URL. So we have given a name to this parameter, the label to the which the user is going to be seen in the front end. Now guys, after that, the field which we are creating over here, is this field a dynamic dropdown or a static dropdown? We also have an option to add one of these as well. So if you're creating some kind of dynamic dropdown or giving some options or asking user to select something from the static dropdown, you can also do that over here. Now it is asking us for the field type. So in the dropdown, we have field type. So this field is going to be a string. That's why we have selected string over here. Mark this field as required, that if the user is manually entering some data and it is a required data, you can select it. It is obvious. And the next thing it asks us is that is this field is a webhook URL. So yes, guys, the trigger which we are going to set up, this trigger is going to be a webhook based, and this field which we are creating is a webhook URL. So we just have to select it, and then we have to actually enter the test value of a webhook URL over here, just for the sake of setting up this integration. After setting the test value of the webhook URL, just add some help text regarding the trigger which you have created and the connection as well. Likewise, I have entered over here, that is, click on capture webhook response and then go to corresponding event in MailerLite account. So in this way, guys, basically what we can do, we can add any kind of help text or instruction that is need to be done by the user in the front end over here. After configuring it, just click on save. So in this way, we have configured one field or one parameter over here. Now it is asking us for the request body, the raw JSON data which we want to send. So here you have to actually enter the raw JSON data or request body if required, which you want to send with this API endpoint URL. So here I have added, as you can see, I have added the URL field and the actual webhook URL. And I am sending this webhook URL for the event of campaign send, as you can see over here. So whatever JSON body or request body you want to create according to your trigger event and the application, you just have to enter it over here. After entering all of these things, just click on save, and we have successfully built a trigger in Pabbly Connect. Our first trigger is done. If you want to test it, you can also click on the send test request and test this data. So now guys, how this trigger looks in front end. Let's check it. We'll just go to our Pabbly Connect dashboard, just a second. And after that, we'll just create a test workflow and check this trigger. Let's create a workflow. For example, the name of the workflow is demo. And then here in trigger window, let's select our application. So the name of the application on which we were working right now was named as MailerLite Clone. So let's search for this application. MailerLite Clone Private. So this is the application on which right now we were working. So let's select this application. Let's select the trigger event. So this was a trigger event campaign set on which we had a look just now. Click on connect. And yes, guys, as I told you, like after building the integration, the token, the bearer token which we are going to enter over here is going to get replaced by the token entered by the user in the front end. So here we just have the user have to enter the actual token and it will be replaced in the connection. Let me use my existing connection. Let's click on save. And yes, guys, this is how we have configured this trigger. And just click on save and send test request. And we can see that it has changed to waiting for response. So in this way, guys, we can see that the trigger which we have created is working perfectly fine. Now after that, let's move to the actions section over here. So from the left side, click on actions. And then here you can see that there are lots and lots of action I have already created. Out of which the action event on which we are going to have a look right now is named as assign subscriber to a group. So this is the app action event. And as you can guess, by using this action event, I'm actually assigning one of my MailerLite account subscriber to a particular group in MailerLite. So we just have to enter the action details as well, some basic details like the name, description, video tutorial, important help text, and all of this. And just click on save. After that, let's move to this and we will scroll down, and here you can see I have added something like inbuilt action details. So there are two of inbuilt action which we have created. What are these inbuilt action and how it works? We will see this in a couple of minutes. But first, let's scroll down and come to this action event API configuration. Now here guys, what is this action event is going to do? We have to actually configure this as well, just the way we have done it in the trigger. So we have to select our HTTP method. So the method, the API endpoint which we are going to use, uses the method as post. So I have selected it. Now this is the API endpoint URL. We have referred to the API document of the MailerLite, and let me show you the actual API endpoint. Let's go to groups, assign subscriber to a group, and yes, this is the exact endpoint. So we have used this endpoint and the post method, the method is post. And here this endpoint requires subscriber ID and group ID. It is required to fire this endpoint or to run this endpoint URL. Now guys, the endpoint which we are going to break using this endpoint, as I told you, we are going to add a subscriber in MailerLite to a particular group. Now to do so, as you can guess, as you can see over here, we require the ID of the subscriber to whom we are assigning to a group and the ID of the group that in which group we are going to assign that subscriber. Now here till now, as you can guess, we don't have any data of the subscriber, the list of subscriber or a list of groups which we have in our MailerLite account. Now to get this data in our workflow and to get this action event working, we have built some kind of inbuilt actions as well in Pabbly Connect. Now to build an inbuilt action, to create an inbuilt action, we just have to click on this inbuilt action button. And after that, by clicking on create inbuilt action, you can create yours as well. So right now we have used two inbuilt action. The first one is get account subscriber. Let's have a look on that. I will just open it. Here are the basic details like this inbuilt action type. So we have three types of inbuilt action, either a drop down and custom field default, either it is a multi-step action, or it is a app authentication validator. So right now we have selected drop down and custom field action. We have given this inbuilt action a name. If you want, you can give a description as well. Save this data. And now we have to actually configure the API. We have to set up the API configuration of this inbuilt action as well. So guys, MailerLite was actually giving an API endpoint URL, and that is it. And using this API endpoint URL, we can basically get a list of all the subscribers from our MailerLite account. Now, we have basically used this endpoint URL and received a list of all the subscribers from our MailerLite account so that our user in the front end can select that from the dropdown or from the list that which subscriber they want to assign to a particular group. So we have configured this API endpoint. We have selected the authentication bearer token and entered the bearer token here as well. And after that, we have just selected transform object into array, and then we have selected array as data. And in response, one by one, we have received a list of all the subscribers from our MailerLite account. We have received the data of the subscribers. So in this way, we have built this inbuilt action. So let me show you the API doc. Let's go to subscribers. Let's install subscribers, and this is the endpoint from MailerLite's API doc, as you can see over here. So our goal was to create an action event to assign a subscriber to a group. For that, we have required two things. We have required the subscriber list of subscribers, all the subscribers, and the list of all the groups. So using this inbuilt action in the backend as a step, we have received the data of all the subscribers. Similarly, we have built another inbuilt action that was of get groups. So guys, in this inbuilt action, we have used the API from MailerLite's API doc to get the list of all the groups of our MailerLite account, and then we have used it in the next step of action. So we have created this inbuilt action, and while making this action event in Pabbly Connect, as we saw, we have actually used it. So whenever a user will try to use this action event, that is assign subscriber to a group and make the connection of their MailerLite account, automatically while using this action event, we will get the details of all the subscribers from their MailerLite account, and also the details, a list of all the groups from their MailerLite account. Now, after getting this data, we have to configure this data and show this data to the user in the front end in such a way, guys, that the user can actually select the subscriber and group that which subscriber they want to assign to which group. So we have this endpoint URL. The request body type is JSON. If you have some other, you can select it from the drop down, and we don't want to wrap this data in array. After that, guys, we are not passing any kind of HTTP headers with this. If your application requires it, you can select it. And next thing it asks us is set body, query, or path parameter. So the way we have selected a parameter or field, created a field in our triggers, the same way we also have to create some parameters or some fields in action as well. And we require basically two fields. Two things are required to run this endpoint to execute this event. That is the subscriber ID and the group ID. So we have created two parameters, two fields over here. And one, by clicking on this, we are going to configure them. So this is basically a parameter which we have entered over here in endpoint, and we are going to configure it. Let's click on this configure button. And in configure field details, you can see or select the data which is going to be shown to the user in front end. So the name or the label or name is subscriber. So user will be seeing subscriber, select subscriber over here. So this is the name. Then the drop down, the field which we are going to create is a dynamic drop down. And after that, after selecting dynamic drop down, we have option label and option value. So in the drop down below option label, we can see that the inbuilt action steps which we have added, inbuilt action events which we have added of get account subscriber and get group, we can see responses from that. So out of all of this, which response we want to show to our users in the front end. So in option label, the response which we are going to select is the response which will be shown in the drop down to the users in front end. So we are going to select the response of email. And in option value, from the drop down, we can see the same two responses. But in option value, we have to select the response that by selecting this, what response out of all of this will be sent to MailerLite for the API call. So here we have to send the email as well. So in both the fields right now here, we are also showing the email to the users of all the subscribers on their MailerLite account. And also we are going to send the email. Now to actually know, guys, what kind of option value we should select over here, we have to refer to the API doc of the application. Whatever data it is asking us, we have to basically enter that data or select that data over here. Then if you want to add some kind of static dropdown, you can also do that. But in dynamic dropdown, user can either select the subscriber from the dropdown, select the value from the dropdown, or they can turn the mapping button on and map the value directly according to their choice. Then it is asking us field type, the field which we have created here over here. What is the type of this field? So it is a select field. The user is going to select something from the dropdown, from the dynamic dropdown. Then is this field required? Yes, make this field required. And we have some other options like populate custom field on this field change and disable HTML rendering. If you want, you can choose any of this according to your choice. After that, here we have the help text, that what is the help text you want to enter. Choose the subscriber email ID or map with valid subscriber ID. Example this. So here we are telling the user that what they have to do. Either they have to select the subscriber email ID from the drop down, or by turning on the mapping button, they can map the subscriber ID or email ID. After configuring the field details, just click on save, and we have successfully configured this field of subscriber ID. Now the next thing is the group ID. Let's click on this configure field and follow the same process. But here in this dynamic dropdown, we have to select the response or the data which we have received from get groups inbuilt action event. So from that, we have selected the name of the group. We are going to show the name of the group in the dropdown to the user in front end. And in backend, guys, in option value over here, we are going to send the group ID, the ID of the group which user has selected in the front end to MailerLite by the API call. So in this way, this dynamic dropdown works in configuration. And rest of the field, as you all know, are the same. Just add the help text and other details according to your choice and click on save. So here guys, we have successfully configured both of the parameters which were required for the firing this API endpoint. Right now, we don't want to send any kind of raw JSON data over here for this endpoint. That's why we haven't selected it. If your API endpoint requires to send some data, you can just select it. And now we can see that after clicking on save, we have successfully built this endpoint. Means the action event of assign subscriber to a group under this application named as MailerLite clone is built. Now let's check this action event in the front end. So we'll go to our Pabbly Connect workflow. We'll just scroll down, come to actions, and once again, we will search for our application. For example, MailerLite clone. This is the application on which we were working right now. After that, let's select the action event. From the dropdown, we can see all the action event. This is the action event assign subscriber to a group. Select it and click on connect. So as we saw guys, the token, the bearer token or API token of the MailerLite account of the user will be replaced by the token which they are going to enter over here. So let's select the existing connection and let's check this action event which we have built. And yes, here you can see that in backend in the while building this action event, we have added two fields over here. That was a subscriber and the group. So we can see both of the fields over here. And in the dropdown below subscriber, we can see a list of all the subscribers which we have added in our MailerLite account. And also guys, in the dropdown below groups, we can see a list of all the groups. So to get the list of subscriber and groups, we have created inbuilt actions in a backend in Pabbly Connect while developing this app, integrating this app, and we can see that details. Also, we have added these fields as dynamic fields. So if the user wants, they can actually map the data as well according to their choice by switching to this mapping button on. So guys, in this way, you can actually integrate your own application inside Pabbly Connect. So in this video, we have learned how you can integrate your application inside Pabbly Connect, how you can build triggers, actions, and also how you can create some inbuilt action steps as well using the bearer token authentication type. Now, if you're from the applications team, you can actually make this integration inside Pabbly Connect and submit it from approval. And once this application got approved by the Pabbly Connect team, it will be publicly accessible on the Pabbly Connect platform. And if you are not from the applications team, but somehow you build the applications integration inside Pabbly Connect and you want to share that integration privately with the users, you can also do that by sharing or creating some invite links. Just go to the sharing section and then you can share this application integration with the users as well. So this is it for today's video, guys. I hope this video was helpful to you. If you have any doubts or queries, you can write them in the comment box below. So thank you. Have a great day.